Top 5 teams that need a reboot. I'm talking about an in-season reboot. These are teams that are not getting rid of their coach. They're not, nobody's really on the hot seat to whatever degree. Some of them you might say, one of them you might say, but they aren't who they thought they were going to be, and they need to Control, Alt, Delete, and restart and try to find who they are for the rest of the season now that we're at the midway point. Number 5, Michigan State is absolutely not who they thought they were going to be. Mel Tucker is getting paid $9 million a year. He's in no danger. They're going to give him plenty of lead to fix this thing, but not the best look to give a guy $9 million and then the next year continually just look disappointing week after week after week and not really be able to establish an identity. And part of that is because, he built the team last year out of the transfer portal, and that's not always a reliable strategy, much like free agency in professional sports. Sometimes you win that way, sometimes you don't.
Yeah, it's clearly been disappointing. They fortunate to get that win against Wisconsin this past weekend, or it'd be very interesting to hear, what the talk would be like with an 0-5 stretch. But, 4-game losing streak up until that win. Just not at all what you signed up for. I think that Michigan State absolutely panicked with that contract and really should be like kind of a lesson for programs moving forward on how to react to coaching interest. And especially, if your guy's like even rumored to be a target somewhere. I suppose that, schools could have, been coming at him, but realistically, is everybody going to be convinced like you were that he's $9 million man? I don't know about that. I think that they overreacted in a major way to one stretch and didn't consider maybe the possibility of like, hey, maybe we need a little bit more to look at. Maybe we need to see him without, the transfer portal this year. And see, I don't know. I just feel like that was a rush to contract for whatever reason there was. And I don't know how much they regret it, but man, had they lost their 5th in a row, it would have gotten awfully spicy, and it's already getting a little spicy. But, that contract still amazes me.
Yeah, again, they've got to find out who they really are. Number 4, and then really the team that kind of one of the teams that inspired this is Baylor. Look, when I say reboot, they just got to figure out who they are, this team. They went into the year, I think, thinking that this was going to be, especially at quarterback, maybe an offensively enhanced version of last year's team. But that's not the case, due in large part to the fact that while at times the offense has done better things, than they did a year ago, or different things they did a year ago, the defense is a shell of what it was. So we just talked about it with Joe 30 minutes ago. Who are you? They need to figure out who they are going forward. It starts this week against Kansas, but a reboot is what I'm talking about here. Not a restart, like not a top-down thing. Just figure out who you are, and Baylor is kind of the perfect team for this because they're good. They're not far off, but they've got to tweak something just to get pointed in that right direction.
If they lose this weekend, I'm done talking about their identity and all that. Yeah. I'm just going to tell you right now, I'm not gonna dip into who they are and all that. I think we'll know very clearly who they are if they lose this weekend. Yeah. However that happens. This is gut check time. And if they've got some guts, they'll show up ready to play. And I'm not like, trying to motivate or anything. Nobody cares what I think about, how they're playing. But I feel like if you don't win this weekend, then there's really no point in us discussing what could they do down the stretch or what could they manage to find themselves into. I'm sure we will, but my interest level will be at an all-time low if they're emerging from this weekend at 3-4.
What is Bill Parcells' old saying? It's not like maybe he invented this. You are what your record says you are.
Yeah.
They're 3-3.
Yep.
And, I told you guys last week on the text chain, they were having 3-3 moments during the game, just where, you measure every, bad thing with a good thing and vice versa, just how it goes. Number 3, Miami. I think Mario Cristobal stepped into thinking that he was going to have a quarterback that could really drive this offense and be the engine here. And Tyler Van Dyke's just kind of a guy.
He was better last year.
But he's regressed a little bit. He's just kind of a guy. They don't have the, Miami skill position players that I think sometimes when you get to a program, I think it happened with Scott Frost in Nebraska. I think it happened with probably 6 coaches in Michigan. I know it happened with Willie Taggart at FSU. I can name probably Clay Helton at USC. When you get there, you think that maybe the athletes aren't the problem because athletes are going to come to this place because it is this place. That is, I think, a big mistake. I think you have to approach every program with the absolute, what is the reality of the situation? That way you're not like, oh, well, it's not just coaching or scheme. It's you don't have the guys. And Miami right now doesn't have the guys. I think Mario Cristobal is the guy to get the guys, but I think he probably is surprised that they had less than he even thought they did.
I don't know, man. I think it was pretty obvious that the city wasn't really a pull or the program wasn't really a pull when you were just sitting out there throwing out NIL dollars like it was the strip club this offseason and acting like you were just going to buy your way to a national championship as so many Hurricanes fans graced our chat rooms back in like the spring and summer months about you're just hating on the U and whatever garbage they were talking about. You can't buy your championship. Some teams are trying. Some teams may be having some roundabout ways, but yeah, they scored big in NIL and thought they'd go balls to the wall there, and it hasn't turned into what they thought. Now, maybe it ultimately does, but I think there are people that had legitimate questions about Cristobal as a head coach, not like whether he's deserving to be a head coach or whether he could coach in Miami, but like how good is he really? Like, is this Saban that we're talking about in Miami that's returning home, or is this just another pretty good coach that may or may not be the guy that brings Miami back? I think it's the latter, but the way that it was treated because you pulled him from Oregon and all, it was like the son is coming home, and then you throw in the NIL money. It's like bring back the Miami of the 80s, and it's just nowhere close to that, not even a smidgen of what that was. Tyler Van Dyke's not as good as he was last year, probably too much hype going to his head. But yeah, there was just a lot. I think they were over their skis because of NIL dollars and things like that this offseason, and that probably distorted expectations a little bit. I saw where they're favored to win this weekend against Duke, and if you look at their schedule outside of Clemson, and then FSU's FSU in Miami, so who the heck really knows with that? But I think Clemson's like the only lock on their schedule that they'll lose. So in theory, they could win, 4 or 5 down the stretch or so. But that's not a given either with this particular club. So, yeah, I'm curious to how they finish, but I think everybody just got way ahead of themselves because the typical Miami flash and dash and cash and all of those types of things.
Number 2, Texas A&M. Their reboot, I think, comes from the coaching staff to and the head coach to a large degree of rebooting what he believes his job to be. And I think that he really needs to look to the guy he's been really mad with for 6 months and do what that guy does. Nick Saban, on game day, has his fingers in everything, but he's not bogged down by one thing and trying to prove it as the play caller. Jimbo's done that. He's won a national championship as a play caller, but now it's a different world. And this team doesn't really need him to be the play caller as much as they need him to be that executive. And he's a fantastic talent evaluator. All these different things that he is, the play calling has maybe, I'm not going to say maybe, it has passed him by.
Do you feel like that's the case, or is him finding a quarterback that runs what he likes passed him by?
Well, I mean, they've got guys that are highly thought of.
Who he wants, yeah.
He's getting who he wants, and I think part of it is, you go back to Jameis Winston.
You don't think Texas got who they wanted back after Colt McCoy?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, and maybe it's
I don't think that was as much of a problem.
But I do think that what he is doing, like Jameis Winston, and I don't know if anybody has the personality that he does, because I never saw Christian Ponder do it at FSU. I've not seen any of their guys. The guys who did well with him, I saw Matt Flynn do it for sure at LSU, is when he yells at you, you yell right back at him. Jameis Winston, Jimbo would yell at him, why'd you do that? Why'd you do that? And he would yell right back at him, here's why I did it. And it worked. Craig, you mentioned we're in a new generation of players. This is probably true for Jimbo quarterbacks as well. And he hasn't had a good one for a good long while, one that has worked as the other ones. I think part of it is he needs to adjust, let somebody else call the plays, adjust that offense, and match the scheme to the talent you're bringing in, which I don't think he's doing right now.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what the solution is either, but A&M certainly one of the more disappointing teams this year so far. And quite frankly, like, it's a little bit unfair to them to be described as disappointing as they sounded, like, or as it sounds when you talk about them, because it's not like they're 1-5 or anything like that. I mean, they're still competitive. I mean, they took Bama to the limits with Haynes King, but I mean, given another NIL program and you know, all the talk about money and things like that are kind of dominating the conversation more so than the actual coaching part of it. I think that's what you're seeing a lot of here is, yeah, Jimbo's lost a bit of his touch in the coaching side of things, especially, you know, with his quarterbacks and his offense. And, you know, I don't know how that gets corrected, but that's going to be Jimbo having to look in the mirror, and given the amount of money he's been given, he should have a really nice mirror to look into at this point. But whether he's willing to do that or not, you know, that's where egos come into play, and who knows? I don't know him well enough.
It's probably like that Snow White mirror.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
He probably got the money to have that one. Number 1, Oklahoma. And look, maybe the first part of the reboot started with Dylan Gabriel coming back against Kansas last week, but I do think that, I know the fans thought this. We don't know what the team thought. Obviously, they were bullish on themselves, as they should be. They're hardworking guys who are trying to win games, but nothing has worked out the way they've planned it for the last month, and they don't understand the defensive scheme yet. Maybe one day they will. Trying to adjust all these new players together hasn't really worked out all that well for them, but they need to readjust, again, now that they have all these losses, what their expectations are for what the rest of the season is and who they are and who they can be to maximize that level. And for them, I'm sure they hope to get to 9-3, but I think most Sooner fans, correct me if I'm wrong, Craig, would be thrilled with 6-6.
Yeah, I don't know that anybody gets thrilled with 6-6,
or at least a deep breath with making a bowl game.
I mean,
after that stretch,
I suppose, but yeah, I mean, I guess that would be, you know, if that's something that you're able to eke out there at the end or something, that would be, you know, something to celebrate. We'd hear and read the stories about how valuable this time is, bowl season, with Venables and his players, and, you know, all that normal routine that you get during that time period. Certainly, we've talked about that with the coaches that have, you know, come to Baylor, how important getting that bowl practice time in is. That'd be good for them. They could certainly use it. You know, I just can't help but think about all the off-season talk and how every time somebody even tried to broach the topic, it felt like, at least, of Oklahoma not being just utterly dominant in Big 12 play and 10-game winners and playoff contenders, how they were basically called stupid and what do they know, and your team sucks and you're a moron and you have no idea what you're talking about. And, well, here we are. Just because you've been good at college football for a long time doesn't mean your entire fan base are college football experts. And so I think a lot of people misdiagnosed Oklahoma. Even non-Oklahoma folks did. I think it's easy and probably lazy to just assume they would, you know, remain near the top. But there are a lot of people that kind of saw some of this coming. I don't know how many OU fans really did. I know the folks that I talked to are a bit, you know, taken aback by kind of how ugly it's been so far. But I don't think all is lost. I think, getting Dylan Gabriel back, to your point, was massive. Like, that was clearly something that was missing from their repertoire. And I'm curious to see how they play the rest of the way now that he's back, so long as he can stay back. But yeah, there are other issues outside of that. But that, like, you look at that Texas game, like, come on, they're not getting shut out if he plays in that game.
Yeah.
I mean, Davis Bevel was such a step down, and, you know, I don't blame him, but that was just not an equal matchup of talent in any way, shape, or form.
No,
so I think that probably made things look even worse than they actually were. I still have belief in Venables that he'll right the ship and get them to where they ultimately want to be. I just don't know if it's going to happen this year.
Yeah, I love your point about just because you've been good in college football for many, many years, and you're a huge fan base and you got a lot of rings or whatever, doesn't mean. Hey. Ask Miami, ask Nebraska, ask a lot of other people who have been through it. Texas.
Denial's the first stage of it.
No,
it's like, no, it can't happen here. Yes, it can.
Yeah,
it is. Get out in front of it.
It's just different, and we've discussed this, that it's different because there's parity in a lot of ways, even though you still have Alabama and Georgia, and we saw what happened to Bama on the road, lose by 3 in an incredible environment, but there is a little bit of parity starting to rear its, what I think is beautiful head, and I just hope we get more opportunities to see more of it, and that will make the college football expansion even more delicious. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Craig. Thanks to Garrett Ross.